The rain came down soft and cold over the memorial garden, a gray curtain that blurred the edges of marble and memory. Thomas Becket stood beneath an umbrella he didn't feel, eyes fixed on the gravestone engraved with his wife's name. A billionaire surrounded by assistants, reporters, and a wall of silence, he had learned to move through grief like a man crossing glass, carefully, quietly, pretending not to bleed. He'd built this memorial after the search had ended, after the Coast Guard declared Elena Becket lost to the storm. 1 year later, he still couldn't say the word widower. He was turning to leave when a small, trembling voice came from behind him. "Your wife is still alive." At first, Thomas thought he'd imagined it, a ghost of a thought, a cruel echo. But when he turned, the sound had a shape. A young black girl standing at the edge of the crowd, rain dripping from the hood of an oversized sweatshirt. She couldn't have been more than 10. Her eyes were enormous, dark, unwavering. "What did you say?" he asked, his voice sharper than he meant. "I saw her," the girl said again. "Your wife." "She's not dead." One of the assistants laughed awkwardly. "Sir, let's get you out of the rain." "Quiet," Thomas snapped. His heart was pounding now, each beat heavy with disbelief. "Little girl, what are you talking about?" The child took a hesitant step forward. "I was there that night, when she came out of the water." She was bleeding, scared. They dragged her into a van. Thomas froze. Every nerve in his body screamed impossible. He had spent weeks scouring the coast himself, paying for private divers, helicopters, sonar, nothing. Just wreckage. Just grief. "My wife drowned," he said quietly. "There were no survivors." "She survived," the girl insisted, shaking her head so hard water flew from her hood. "I remember her. She had a scar right here." She traced her forearm from elbow to wrist, and short blonde hair. "She kept yelling your name." For a moment, the world tilted. That scar, he remembered it vividly. Elena had gotten it years ago in college, falling through a greenhouse window during a protest. And after her chemo, she had worn her hair short, almost defiantly so. Those weren't public details. No newspaper had ever mentioned them. "Who are you?" Thomas asked slowly. "Maya." Her voice trembled, but her eyes did not. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because no one else listened." She swallowed hard. "I told a cop once. He said I was making it up. But I'm not. I saw her. A man with a fake arm took her. He told them to move her before anyone saw." Thomas's breath caught. "Describe him." "White, tall, gray beard. Wore a long coat. His arm, it was fake plastic and it clicked when he moved. Like a robot." Thomas's pulse quickened. He'd seen a prosthetic like that once. An early prototype from a defense contract his company had briefly funded. The project had been canceled after a scandal, or so he thought. "Are you sure?" Maya nodded. "She saw me too. She looked right at me. She was scared, but she knew I could help." Thomas wanted to shout at her to stop, to let him grieve in peace. But then she whispered she was wearing a gold necklace. With a heart pendant, 2 letters on it, E and B. He felt the ground drop beneath him. That necklace was their 10th anniversary gift, custom-made, never once removed. Not even the press knew about it. "Where did you see her?" he asked, voice low. "Behind the old cannery near Pier 14. I hide there sometimes." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a handkerchief. Light blue, soaked, trimmed with lace. A single word was stitched in gold thread. "Elena." Thomas took it with shaking hands. "Where did you get this?" "They dropped it when they stopped the van. I picked it up. The world went still. Rain whispered against stone. Reporters shifted behind him, calling his name, but Thomas didn't hear them. He saw only that frayed handkerchief and the name sewn into its edge. He looked up at Maya. "Get in the car," he said. Her eyes widened. "Really? If what you're saying is true, I need your help." A black sedan pulled up. Thomas opened the door and gestured for her to climb in. Behind them, unnoticed through the fog, a man in a gray coat lowered a pair of binoculars and spoke into an earpiece. "They've made contact," he said. "Proceed to step 2. Inside the car, silence filled the space between them. Maya watched raindrops snake across the window, while Thomas stared at the handkerchief in his palm. For the first time in a year, he dared to hope, and that terrified him more than loss ever had. "Where exactly did you see them take her?" he asked finally. "Down by the docks," Maya said softly. "Behind the cannery. There's a hole in the fence. I watched from there." Thomas leaned back, his mind racing through fragments of memory. The storm, the wreck, the news conferences, the sleepless nights. Could she have survived? Could she have been taken? And the man with the prosthetic arm, you're sure it was his left? Yes, it clicked when he moved. It looked like military stuff. Thomas nodded. A long silence followed. Why did you wait a year to find me? He asked. I didn't know who you were, Maya said. Not until I saw your picture in a magazine at the library. It said you'd be here today. He studied her, small, soaked, too young to lie with such precision. Do you have anywhere to go tonight? She shook her head. Then you'll stay at my house, he said simply, her brows furrowed. You don't even know me. I know enough, Thomas said. You brought me something no one else could. Truth. The car wound through the wet streets, headlights cutting through fog until the city lights vanished behind them. The Beckett estate sat high on the cliffs, a vast modern sprawl of glass and stone. As they entered the long driveway, Maya's eyes widened. She'd never seen anything like it. Inside, warmth wrapped around her. A housekeeper appeared, startled by the sight of the drenched child. She's with me, Thomas said. Get her something warm and something to eat. Minutes later, Maya sat by the fireplace wrapped in a blanket, a plate of grilled cheese and tomato soup before her. She stared at the food like it might vanish. I haven't had real food in a long time, she murmured. Thomas watched her quietly. What about school? Sometimes, she said. When the shelters make me. He leaned forward. Maya, if what you saw helps me find my wife, I'll make sure you never sleep under a pier again. She looked up, searching his face for deceit, and found none. You'd really do that? I don't make promises I can't keep. She nodded slowly. Then I'll tell you everything. She spoke for hours. About the van. About the men. About the strange box one of them dropped. A black device with markings she couldn't read. Thomas listened to every detail, each word tightening the knot in his chest. That night, after Maya had fallen asleep on the couch, Thomas retreated to his office. The house was quiet except for the sea wind outside. He dialed a number he hadn't used in months. A gravelly voice answered. You told me you were done. I was, Thomas said. Until 10 minutes ago. I need surveillance on Pier 14. Look for anyone with a prosthetic arm. The line went silent then. You found something? Maybe, Thomas whispered. Or someone. He hung up and stared at the rain-slicked window. He had spent a year burying his grief under work, money, and silence. But now a child had walked into his life carrying proof that his wife might still breathe. At dawn, he found Maya sitting at the dining table, eating scrambled eggs with careful bites. Her new hoodie was too big but clean. Did you sleep well? He asked. The couch was softer than anything I've ever slept on. Good, he said, because today I need your help. Her spoon paused. You want me to come with you? Yes, Thomas said. I need you to show me exactly where it happened. An hour later, his SUV rolled through the fog-covered docks. Rusted warehouses and broken fences loomed around them. Maya pointed toward a dumpster. There, that's where I was hiding. Thomas parked and scanned the cannery. It looked abandoned, faded signs, shattered windows, but something about it felt wrong. Too quiet, too clean. Wait here, he told Maya. My associate's inside. A voice crackled in his earpiece. Got movement, one guard, south exit, armed. Thomas's instincts sharpened. He moved through the shadows until he reached a locked corridor. The padlock was new, shiny against the rust.
Inside, the air reeked of bleach and metal. A single cot sat in the center.
Restraints hung from its corners. Beside it lay an empty syringe. Then he saw it. Letters scratched faintly into the wall. E.B. Elena Beckett. His vision blurred. She was here, he whispered. His contact, nodded grimly. Not long ago. Maybe weeks. He held up a torn scrap of blue silk embroidered with silver thread. Found this on the floor. Thomas took it, his throat tightening. Her scarf. When he returned to the SUV, Maya's eyes searched his face. You found something, didn't you? He nodded. You were right. She smiled faintly, but there was sorrow in it too. She was scared, wasn't she? Yes, he said quietly. But she fought. She always did. He looked out at the gray waves breaking against the pier. And now so will I. The morning after the discovery at the cannery, the Beckett estate hummed with quiet urgency. Thomas hadn't slept. His office light still burned when dawn broke over the sea. The handkerchief lay on his desk beside the silk scrap and the photo of Elena he could barely look at without shaking. Every instinct he'd buried under a year of numbness had returned, sharpened, electric, alive. Maya sat across from him, sipping cocoa from a mug nearly bigger than her hands. She'd drawn a map of the docks from memory. Every fence, every shadow, every turn she'd taken that night. For someone her age, her recall was startling. "Here," she said, tapping the paper. "They stopped the van right here. There's a gate in the fence. That's where I saw the man with the fake arm." Thomas studied the drawing. "You remember everything?" "I try to," she said quietly. "If I forget, then maybe no one will believe me." He looked up, meeting her eyes. "I believe you." Those 3 words made her blink like she wasn't used to hearing them. By mid-morning, Thomas's old security contact arrived, a stocky man with a calm voice and a soldier's gaze. "You called me out of retirement," he said. "Must be serious." Thomas turned the screen toward him. Images of the cannery flickered. Surveillance footage from the night before, grainy, low light, but unmistakable. "They used it recently. Someone replaced the locks." Ree leaned closer. "You think Elena was held there?" "She was," Thomas said. "Her initials were carved into the wall." Ree exhaled. "Then whoever took her still has resources. You don't just disappear a billionaire's wife without backing." Thomas nodded. "Military, corporate, maybe both." Maya listened silently, fingers curled around the mug. When Ree noticed her, he raised an eyebrow. "She's the witness," Thomas said before Ree could ask. "She saw everything." Ree crouched to her level. "That took guts, kid. You keep that courage. You're gonna need it." That afternoon, they began digging. Thomas called in favors from investigators, hackers, even a few old rivals who owed him quiet debts. By nightfall, the leads pointed in one direction, an old defense subsidiary once under Beckett Technologies' control, later sold off and renamed Ashmont Holdings. Its listed address was a supply depot 2 miles from the pier. Thomas stood by the window, the file glowing on his tablet, the sea stretching dark and endless beyond. "That's where she was taken," he said. Ree looked up. "You sure?" Thomas's voice hardened. "I built the company that built their tools. If they used one of my old projects to hurt her, I'll tear it apart myself." Maya shifted on the couch. "Can I come?" He turned to her. "It could be dangerous." "So?" she said simply. "She's your wife, but she's also someone I couldn't save. Let me try again." He saw the same fire that had once drawn him to Elena. Raw, stubborn compassion. After a long silence, he nodded. "Then you stay close to me, no matter what happens." Night fell heavy and silent as they approached the depot. The SUV's headlights were off. The road little more than a dirt track swallowed by fog. They parked a quarter-mile away, moving the rest on foot. The building loomed ahead. Corrugated metal, no markings but faint light seeping through cracks. Ree scanned the perimeter through night vision lenses. 3 guards. "Minimal patrol," Thomas whispered. "Inside, we find proof. If she's alive, we bring her home tonight." They crept through the shadows, entering through a maintenance vent. The smell of oil and salt clung to the air. Inside, hallways stretched in eerie silence, lined with old machinery covered in tarps. Then came the sound, soft mechanical clicks, like gears turning. Ree froze. "Left arm," he mouthed. They turned the corner. Standing under a flickering light was the man Maya had described. The tall figure with a gray beard and a prosthetic limb gleaming white under the dim bulbs. He barked orders to 2 others. "Move her before sunrise," he said. Thomas's chest constricted. Her. They ducked behind crates as the men dragged someone from a small room, head covered, wrists bound. Even from a distance, Thomas knew that shape, that stillness. "Elena," he breathed. Ree gripped his shoulder. "We can't rush. 3 guns, maybe more." But Thomas was already moving. The years of loss burned away, replaced by something primal. He waited for the guards to turn the corner, then sprang. One punch dropped the first. Ree's silenced pistol hissed twice. The second fell before he could shout. The man with the prosthetic arm turned, shock flashing across his face before Thomas slammed him against the wall. "Where is she?" Thomas growled. The man grinned, blood in his teeth. "You'll wish you hadn't asked." Maya slipped through the door they'd dragged the captive from. Inside, under a single bulb, sat Elena Beckett, tied to a chair, eyes half open, face pale but alive. Maya tore the gag from her mouth. "It's okay," she whispered. "He's here." Outside, a scuffle echoed. The man with the prosthetic arm drew a gun, firing wildly. Bullets shredded metal as Thomas ducked. Ree tackled him, knocking the weapon aside. The shot went through a window, shattering glass and silence together. Within seconds, it was over. The man lay unconscious, and Thomas was kneeling beside Elena, cutting the ropes with shaking hands. "Elena," he whispered. Her eyes fluttered open. "Tom!" He caught her as she sagged forward. "I've got you. You're safe now." But she shook her head weakly. "Not safe." "Not yet," Ree's voice cut in. "We need to move now." They carried her through the vent back to the SUV waiting by the cliffs. A backup team met them halfway. Medics, security, a black van with no insignia. The night swallowed their tracks. As the doors closed, Thomas held Elena's hand. She tried to speak, her voice a whisper. "They'll come." Again, he squeezed her fingers. "Let them." Back at the estate, doctors worked through the night. Elena was malnourished but stable. When the sedatives took hold, Thomas stood by the window, staring into the fog-filled sea. Maya joined him quietly. "She's really alive," the girl said. "Yes," Thomas murmured. "Because of you." Maya looked down. "They'll come for you now. I know. Then what will you do?" He turned to her, eyes cold with purpose. "Finish what she started." The next morning, Thomas sat in the study with Ree. Files covered the table, insurance papers, shipping manifests, encrypted messages recovered from a server in the depot. Elena had left breadcrumbs even while imprisoned. She was building a case, Thomas said. Before she vanished, she'd uncovered something inside the shipping industry, money laundering tied to human trafficking. Ree frowned. "You think the crash wasn't an accident?" Thomas shook his head. "They tried to erase her. When she survived, they hid her." At that moment, Maya appeared in the doorway. She looked small again in daylight, but carried herself with quiet certainty. "So they hurt her because she told the truth," Thomas nodded. "And because she was close to proving it." Maya hesitated, then said softly, "Then we prove it for her." That evening, the estate felt alive again, not with grief, but with resolve. Elena rested in a private wing, monitors humming beside her bed. Downstairs, Thomas and Ree set up what looked like a command center. Laptops, encrypted networks, satellite feeds. Maya sat beside them, sketching faces from memory. The men at the cannery, the gray-bearded leader, the van. Ree studied her drawings. "You've got a sharp eye. I see things people ignore," she said. "Good," he replied. "That's how we win." By midnight, Ree's contacts confirmed what Thomas had suspected. Ashmont Holdings was only one piece of a larger network, a lattice of shell companies. Private contractors and offshore accounts all linked by a single symbol, a black triangle over a white field. The same symbol Elena had been investigating before the crash. Thomas leaned back, exhaustion warring with fury. "It's bigger than I thought," Ree nodded. "Which means they'll come harder." The next day, while Thomas coordinated with lawyers and journalists he trusted, Maya sat by Elena's bedside. The older woman stirred, her eyes opening to the dim light. "Maya," she whispered. "You remember me?" A faint smile. "You were there, by the fence." Maya blinked back tears. "I didn't know what to do." "You did enough," Elena said weakly. "You looked. You didn't turn away." When Thomas entered, Elena's gaze found him. For a moment, neither spoke. Then she whispered, "You believed me once when no one did. Do it again." He nodded, tears burning behind his eyes. "I will." That night, Ree burst into the office holding a tablet. Movement near the cannery, unmarked truck, same type as before. Thomas straightened. "Then they're cleaning up." Ree met his eyes. "Or baiting you." Thomas reached for his coat. "Either way we go." They left under moonless skies. Maya watched from the window, fists clenched. She had wanted to go, to fight beside them, but Thomas had made her promise to stay and protect Elena. Hours later, gunfire echoed faintly through the valley. The estate security channels flickered alive, signals scrambled, then went silent. Maya ran to Elena's room. The woman was sitting up now, pale but steady. "They found him," Elena said softly. Maya hesitated. "How do you know?" Elena smiled faintly. "Because I can feel when Thomas stops being afraid." Just before dawn, the SUV returned. Thomas stepped out, his coat torn, face streaked with blood and dust, but alive. In his hand, he held a hard drive. "Proof," he said simply. Inside the file were names, accounts, evidence of a global network spanning ports and governments. Elena's work completed, but one name stood out among the rest: Hale Whitmore, former intelligence operative turned corporate ghost. The man behind the man with the prosthetic arm. Thomas stared at it. Then that's where we aim next. He looked toward the horizon, the first light breaking through the mist. For the first time in a long while, it didn't feel like morning. It felt like war. 3 weeks later, the world no longer felt still. What began as one man's search for truth had rippled outward into something bigger, something no amount of money or silence could stop. Inside the Beckett estate, the once quiet halls now throbbed with activity. Screens glowed. Voices traded coordinates. Evidence moved like currents through hidden channels. And in the center of it all sat Maya, the girl who once slept under a pier, now tracing the map of a global conspiracy with the steadiness of someone who finally understood her worth. Elena was healing, though the scars around her wrists never fully faded. Every day she grew stronger, feeding on the purpose that now bound them together. Sometimes Thomas caught her watching Maya with the soft pride of a mother. Other times with the silent recognition of one survivor meeting another. One evening, Thomas entered the study to find them side by side. Elena reading a deposition while Maya scribbled notes in a spiral pad. "You two look like you're planning a coup," he joked faintly. Elena didn't glance up. "Revolutions don't plan themselves." Re-entered moments later with new intelligence. "Satellite recon confirms it," he said, dropping a file onto the table. Hale Whitmore resurfaced. "He's running operations out of a decommissioned research base off Iceland. No military oversight, no jurisdiction." Thomas's expression hardened. "Then that's where we end it." Elena rose slowly from her chair. "Not we, you, Maya, and I stay here. Someone has to keep the light burning if you don't come back." Maya's head shot up. "I'm not staying behind." Thomas hesitated, torn between instinct and admiration. She was only 15, but she'd faced down killers, navigated fear, and never once looked away. "Maya," he said gently, "if we fail, the world will need someone they already believe in. You're that person now." Her jaw tightened, but she nodded. "Then you'd better not fail." 2 nights later, Thomas, Ree, and a small strike team landed on the frozen coast of Iceland, under a sky that glowed pale with northern lights. Snow hissed against their gear as they approached the facility, half buried in the cliffside. The structure pulsed faintly, servers alive beneath the ice. Inside, the air was warm, electric. Banks of monitors displayed shipping routes, coded messages, faces caught on surveillance. It was the beating heart of the Black Triangle. And standing in its center was Hale Whitmore, silver-haired, expression calm, dressed in the same precision that once ruled boardrooms and battlefields. "I wondered when you'd find me," he said. Thomas leveled his weapon. "Step away from the servers." Hale smiled faintly. "You think cutting cords ends ideas? Systems don't die, Mr. Beckett, they adapt." Ree moved to the console, plugging in a drive. "We'll see how well yours adapts to daylight." Hale's gaze shifted to the screen as files began uploading. Exposure. The nobleman's weapon. But tell me, when the world sees what I built, will they destroy it or copy it? "Doesn't matter," Thomas said. "You won't be around to watch." At that, Hale stepped closer, unarmed but unafraid. "You've already won the hearts, Beckett. But hearts don't change systems. Fear does." "Then be afraid," Thomas answered, pressing the transmitter. Every monitor blinked. Across the globe, feeds switched. Televisions, phones, newsrooms, all hijacked by a single stream. Documents scrolled in real time. Shipping manifests, payment trails, photos of victims. The truth poured out, unstoppable. For the first time, Hale's composure cracked. "You fool," he hissed. "You've started a fire you can't control." Thomas met his gaze. "Good." Gunfire erupted as operatives stormed in, drawn by the alarm. Ree returned fire, shouting, "We're outnumbered, move." They fled through the maintenance shaft as explosions rattled the ground. Behind them, the servers burned, sparks blooming like dying stars. When they emerged into the snow, helicopters waited. Elena's contingency, coordinated from thousands of miles away. Hours later, Thomas stood in a safe house watching the world unravel on live broadcasts. News anchors stumbled through reports of corruption, trafficking, bribery. Politicians resigned. Executives vanished. For once, money couldn't bury truth. Maya saw it first from the estate's command room. The feeds stacked across the wall, each one showing the same words, black triangle exposed. She clutched her pendant, a small silver star Thomas had given her, and whispered, "She did it." When Thomas returned, exhausted and bruised, she ran to meet him. "You're back," he smiled faintly. "We're all back." But the victory felt fragile. 3 days later, Elena called an emergency meeting. "They'll come again," she said, voice steady. "For me, for you, for her," Rhea agreed. "Hale's network is fractured, not dead. If he survived Iceland, he'll strike back." Thomas rubbed his temples. "Then we stay ahead. We make sure the world keeps watching." Weeks passed. Headlines multiplied. Investigations spread across continents. The U.S. Senate called for hearings, and when the summons arrived at the Beckett estate, Thomas wasn't surprised. They wanted testimony, from him, from Elena, and from Maya. The morning of the hearing, Washington buzzed like a hive. Protesters filled the steps of the Capitol. Inside, cameras pointed toward a long table where 3 chairs waited. Maya adjusted the microphone nervously, but Elena squeezed her hand. "You belong here." The chairman called the session to order. Thomas went first, detailing how grief had turned into revelation, how corruption had hidden behind charity, how one small voice had reignited hope. Elena followed, describing captivity, the silence, and the names she'd memorized in the dark. Then came Maya. The room fell still as she leaned forward, voice calm but carrying. "When I was 10, I saw a woman dragged from the sea. I told a teacher, a cop, a stranger. No one believed me. Not until I met Mr. Beckett. He listened, and that changed everything." She paused, looking directly into the cameras. "I'm not brave because I spoke up. I'm just tired of being invisible." "We all are." For a heartbeat, the chamber was silent. Then the crowd outside erupted. Online, her words spread like wildfire. The hashtag ICU trended worldwide. That night, new legislation passed. A global task force formed. The phrase Black Triangle became synonymous with the cost of silence and the power of one voice. But far from the Capitol, in a dark coastal mansion, Hale watched the broadcast alone. He poured a drink, eyes reflecting the flicker of Maya's speech. "She's remarkable," he murmured. A woman beside him asked, "Then why not stop her?" He smiled. "Because symbols make better enemies than corpses. The world needs its villains." He lifted the glass to the screen. Until next time. Months rolled by. The Beckett estate bore the scars of battle. Walls patched, windows replaced, but the air was different now, lighter. Elena walked again among her roses. Thomas rebuilt not just his company, but his purpose, funneling his wealth into foundations for survivors. And Maya, she had become something none of them expected. Invitations poured in, interviews, conferences, youth summits, yet she turned most of them down. "I don't want to be famous," she told Thomas one evening. "I just want people to listen to kids like me." He smiled. "They're listening now because of you." She looked out toward the sea. "Then I can't stop." 6 months later, she stood on a stage in Chicago, addressing thousands at the Global Youth Forum. The hall fell silent as she began. "When I first spoke, no one believed me. The second time, the world had no choice. Don't wait for permission to speak. The truth doesn't need it." Applause thundered. Some wept. Others simply stood in awe. Back home, Thomas and Elena watched the live stream from their garden. The roses swayed in the wind, red against the gray horizon. "She's not the same girl we met," Elena whispered. "No," Thomas said softly. "She's who she was always meant to be." Inside, Rhee and the tech team finished uploading the final archive. Every file, every name from Hale's empire, into a public, permanent record. "No more shadows," Rhee said. "They can't erase this again." For the first time in years, Thomas allowed himself to breathe. That night, as stars spread across the Arizona sky, Maya stood outside, hood pulled over her hair, watching the constellations blaze quietly above. "We're still here," she whispered. Thomas joined her. "And we're not done." "Do you think they'll remember us?" she asked. "They'll remember what we stood for," he said. She nodded. "Then that's enough." Silence settled between them, not heavy like before, but peaceful. Inside, Elena hummed softly, the sound drifting through the open window like a promise. Far away in some hidden place, Hale opened a worn journal and wrote a single line. "Every movement needs its villain." Then he closed it, the faintest smile on his lips. Back in the Beckett home, firelight danced across the walls. Maya's framed sketch hung above the mantel, the one she'd drawn of Elena's face all those months ago. Beneath it, Thomas had carved a single inscription: "Truth doesn't drown, it rises." And as the night wind moved through the open door, carrying the scent of salt and rain, it felt less like an ending, and more like the beginning of a world that had finally learned to listen.